has started.
Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt Thiessen. Today is Sunday, January the 27th, 2019. It is 8 p.m. in New York and 5 p.m. in Los Angeles. It is after midnight, 1 a.m. in London, and Sydney, Australia is at 12 noon. Wherever you are in the world, thank you for tuning in to another edition of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And I see my friend Anne-Marie is also connecting in, and she'll be connected in shortly anyway. She's still setting everything up at her end, but that's okay. We will get started, and when she's ready to jump in, she'll just jump right in here. Oh, and I hear a background. I think she's in the. She said she was in a.
Can you hear
jazz
me,
club.
Walt?
I hear you. I hear the jazz. I hear all kinds of stuff.
Oh, maybe I should. Maybe I shouldn't do that then.
Why don't you wait till you guys have left the facility, and then you can call in. And,
okay. All right.
Because otherwise,
okay,
it'll just kind of take over, and that doesn't work.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want the music to be too loud. Okay, sounds good. I'll catch up with you in a few minutes. Walt.
Okay, sounds great.
Thanks. All righty. Bye-bye.
So anyway, while we're waiting for Anne-Marie to vacate, she and Mike have been out for dinner, and obviously, you don't want to leave the club too early if you can help it. But she'll be back next 5 minutes or so, 10 minutes, and then she'll join the conversation. I figured in the meantime, we could just be talking about a couple things that are fairly common, I think, in most people's lives. And I'm talking now from my own experience today, actually yesterday and today. When we are, when we're deliberate creators, like our audience is, or most of our audience is anyway, some people are new to the law of attraction, new to being a deliberate creator. So this may not yet apply to you, although it probably does in some extent. But one of our goals is to be as happy as we can, to try to do things and pick things and think about things and talk about things that make us feel good, or at least make us feel better than what we were feeling a moment ago, and just constantly strive to be in a place of feeling positive and thinking pleasant thoughts about others instead of critical thoughts, and thinking pleasant thoughts about ourselves instead of critical thoughts, and focusing on what's going right instead of what's going wrong, knowing that when we do that, we increase dramatically our ability to attract what we want most into our lives. Well, even the best of us, we still have days where it just doesn't feel good. And this weekend was one of them for me. I went into the weekend feeling really good. Yesterday, Saturday, was okay. It wasn't a bad day, but as the day went on, it was just, it just felt like the world was closing in on me. And today, I woke up this morning, I did my usual routine, I did my mirror exercises, my videos and all that kind of stuff, and nothing was working. I wasn't getting into that good feeling place, and it was a little bit alarming. I kind of wallowed in it for a bit, trying to figure out what to do. Went to talk to Louise. I couldn't think of anything really to help with. She couldn't really think of anything to help. I went to my list, and I've talked about my list that Patty Framo once suggested to me that I set up for days just like this, where things weren't going well. A list of things that I can go to, processes I can go to that help me break out of funks and so forth. And so I went to my list, and I started doing one thing that I saw on the list that looked interesting. I did that for a few minutes, but it was, kind of breaking up the mood. And then I went to a second thing, and that helped a little bit. But I'm telling you, it was one of those days where it just wasn't coming around. And then I did a third thing that was on the list. And actually, I did two things at once. One of my favorite things to do is to take a walk while listening to my positive music list. And so I did that, and that actually helped some. But even after that, I get home, and I'm tired, and I'm just not myself. And so I went and took a nap, which is something which is really rare for me to do. I just don't do that. So it was a day where it was out of the norm for me. And I mention this because every once in a while, anybody can have that happen to them. And it's a reminder that despite the fact that we can do all of these processes and so forth, all of us are still learning how to be in that better feeling place and how to stay there on a regular basis. And that there are going to be some days where it just doesn't come together the way you want it to. So what do you do? How do you handle a situation like that? And I think I know what the answer is. you just do your stuff anyway. You do your processes. You do whatever you can to make yourself feel as good as you can go for. And maybe on a day like that, sometimes the best you can go for is not a really high level. I mean, it just may not be, but you just go for it anyway, and you just keep going for it, and you keep focusing on what you like. One thing that I noticed was really happening today, and definitely happens in situations like this, is that my mind kept going to all these unhappy thoughts, all these negative things going on in the world, things negatively going on in my life, things negatively going on in the lives of people that I care about. And you know what? It still was not really changing for me, but nevertheless, every time that I found myself focusing on that, I just tried very gently to pull myself back to something positive. And it was actually a good opportunity in the sense that, I know that sounds strange, right? You're really feeling crappy. You're just not feeling good. So how is that such a good opportunity? Well, it actually is. It's actually a good opportunity to just keep practicing focusing on the basics. And by the basics, I mean, what are the things that you're grateful for in your life? What do you really appreciate in your life? That's where I would often start, and that's what I started with at this point during the day today. I started saying, well, you know what? We've got a place to live. We're warm in the middle of a cold winter. We've got two cats that we love. Louise and I love each other. We have food to eat. We have clothing on our backs. And did that make a huge difference focusing on that? No, not really. But it did make some difference. So it became a day of look for little ways to improve the mood. And in the process of doing that, I also realized that when I am, or when anyone is, trying to just go for improvement, Abraham Hicks talks about how they have their 22-point scale, right? It's a scale that includes like 14 different items that we would describe as negative, about 7 items that are positive, and another one that's in the kind of the neutral area. Which I always thought was kind of interesting. There's more negatives than positives on their scale. But on the other hand, that's the way most humans tend to think anyway. We all tend to focus more on negative than we should. Anyway, they talk about how if you're feeling depressed, go for a couple steps up to anger, or a couple steps higher than that to fear, or to frustration, or one of the other less negative steps. And as I was kind of dealing with all this, one of the things I asked myself is, well, what am I feeling? And an interesting answer came to me. I don't know. I just don't feel good. In other words, I found I was not in a good place to even identify what the feeling was. It just didn't feel good, and that's all I could say about it. And if I could do something that would actually feel a little bit better, then that's what I did. I did something that felt a little bit better. What did a little bit better feel like? Did it feel like, could I identify again what the new feeling was? No, not really. It just felt a little better. That was it. So that was a reminder. Don't worry too much what the label is. So I didn't. I just stopped worrying about what the label was. It was just, do I feel better? That was it. And that's enough. That's all you really have to do. Just, does it feel better? And that's what I focused on. I focused on it felt a little bit better. So with that thought in mind, while we're waiting for Anne-Marie and Mike to exit the restaurant they're in, and Anne-Marie to connect in and have a nice Sunday evening conversation with me and with us. First of all, if you're tuned in and you're on the live stream and you want to ask a question for me to answer, or ultimately for both of us to answer when she gets on, feel free to type it into the chat area of the live stream window. But until I see questions coming in there, I'm just going to read a short story that was written by Mike McEwen, Anne-Marie's husband, that was included in the book that we published this past year called Your Daily Dose of Happy, Real Success Stories of the Law of Attraction. And this is a story of starting from a place of not feeling good at all. And he was definitely in a place where he was not feeling good, and just started taking steps, even though he didn't know what to do with it, and eventually produced some results that absolutely amazed him. And it's a very short story. It won't take long to read it. In fact, I think it's only about 4 or 5 pages. So, this is called Divorced, Broke, and Homeless by Mike McEwen. You can tell where we're starting. He says, that's where I was in 2013, the result of 20 years of trying to make everyone else happy but myself. I guess this is what it takes to wake up and be responsible for your own happiness. Looking back on it today, I am very grateful for all of the failures and the lessons I learned, which helped me to write this story in the hope that I can inspire someone who's going through something similar. When one gets caught up in life's circumstances, it's like being trapped in a revolving door of lack. The law of attraction gave me plenty of opportunities to continue feeling all that I lacked, and eventually I realized that the one thing I lacked most was happiness. My divorce was finalized July 28th, 2013, and on August 1st, I arrived in Phoenix, Arizona to visit my daughter, son-in-law, and two grandkids for a healing vacation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was moving forward, and I was so grateful to be with my Arizona family. I arrived back in Connecticut in late August, feeling refreshed and loved and appreciated, something I hadn't felt in a long time. I was still homeless, but not broke. A good friend of mine invited me to stay at his house until I could get my own apartment. John likes big bonfires, and I arrived one Friday evening to find him building one. It gave us a great opportunity to sit around the fire and drink some beer, and so we did. And around the fourth beer, I decided to burn all of the old negative past paperwork and anything linked to my unhappiness. I made the intention to connect with new people and with similar interests. Oh, what a great night that was. I had no idea what was about to happen, though. Sitting at the kitchen table the next morning having coffee, I decided to go online and to check out some events, and I found a meditation group meeting that afternoon in the town where I grew up and decided to attend. After the meeting, I talked with the facilitator of the meditation group, telling her that I would like to find more events to attend so I could meet more positive, like-minded people, and she recommended I check out a website called meetup.com. Back at my friend's house that afternoon, I decided to go online to check out the meetup.com site. I typed in local events, and the first thing that popped up was laughter yoga at the Buttonwood Tree. So, without hesitation, I signed up for it. Not only did laughter yoga teach me how to laugh at things that would normally upset me, but I met the director of the Buttonwood Tree, Anne Marie, and it didn't take long before a strong connection grew between us, something that hadn't happened in a long time. She asked me out for tea. I replied, "It's 9 o'clock at night. How about a beer?" Now, in conversation over a few beers, we found that we had a lot in common, so I invited her to Sunrise Tai Chi that next morning, and I was happy that she showed up. After Tai Chi, we went out for breakfast, and it was a wonderful start to a new relationship. Before I knew it, we had a dinner date. The food and the conversation were great as we sat overlooking Lake Pocatapog at Angelico's Lake House restaurant. What a great manifestation. Several days after our dinner date, she handed me a key to her apartment. Hesitating at first, I realized here was another manifestation. No longer homeless and no longer alone. And so as we say in laughter yoga, very good, yay. After living with her for about a year, the landlord sold the house and we had to move out in 3 weeks. Oh no! At that time, my contracting business was slow and money was real tight. So how could we find a place to live in 3 weeks? Well, intended to be and it shall be. My then fiancé just kept saying, "No worries, the right place to move into will show up at the right time." Okay, I thought, but where's the money going to come from? If we feel abundant when there seems like there's nothing to feel abundant about, the universal law of attraction matches the feeling with more of the same. People, circumstances, and events line up at the right time, and that's what happened. Anne Marie called a realtor whom she worked with in the past and received a lead on a single-family house for lease that she thought might be available but wasn't sure. Anne Marie investigated and found that it was the perfect little house for us. But we had 5 days to sign the lease, and we didn't have the $3,000 we needed up front for it. I had sold a contracting job that would yield us enough money, but it would take 30 days to complete the job and get paid. 3 days before signing the lease, I received a call from the management company for the construction project. The bank had taken over their property, creating a very unusual situation because they had to close out all the accounts for that property. He requested that I send my invoice for the job, even though I hadn't started, so he could pay me in full to get it off the books for the sum total of $9,600. Problem solved. I still can't believe it. So just goes to show, even when you're in a bad place, you can get into a better place. And when you get into that better place, things start to happen in ways that you don't even expect. And of course, that was written by Mike McEwen, Anne Marie's husband. Anne Marie's going to be popping in a moment or two, and when she does, we'll get this conversation started in terms of what's been going on with her in the weekend. But in the meantime, if you have any questions you'd like us to address, feel free to type them into the live stream. If you're listening to the live stream, that is, and if you're listening to the recording, as most of our listeners do, don't feel like you can't ever get involved in these conversations because you can. Just send an email or use the contact page on our website or send something via messenger on Facebook or tweet or whatever, and we'll address them. We do address them when people send stuff in. We always address their questions on the air, and we inevitably get very grateful responses afterward when people hear that we actually did address their topics and questions. So feel free to do that yourself if you'd like to, and we will do that on an upcoming show. I don't see any comments in the question area, and Anne-Marie isn't here yet, so let's see. I'm not sure where I want to go with it next, other than to say just the activity that we talked about today. I mean, I talked earlier about how I'd been having kind of a rough day and the things that I did to try to get myself into a better place. I ended up taking a nap. I ended up doing like 3 or 4 or 5 things on my positive items list, and just kind of crawled my way back. And then finally, here I am doing the podcast with you. And I'm thinking to myself, well, normally I want to get into one of these podcasts feeling good, right? And I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't up to it in that sense. And yet I just kept working and working and working on it. And when I finally got to sit down here, even though Anne Marie hadn't been able to come yet, even though I didn't really know where we're going with it, even though we don't even have questions coming in, I still, just by focusing on feeling good, was able to get me into a better feeling place. And so here I am feeling good. I just read that little story that Mike wrote, and that feels good too. That's the secret. It's moment by moment. It's minute by minute. Even on days when you're just not feeling good, when it feels like everything's going against you, you just focus on every single positive you can find. And that's what I've been doing. And I can tell you, it's working. It's working right now. It's making me feel better. I mean, if I were to try to name where I was on the 22-point scale that Abraham creates, I'm not sure I could identify what I'm feeling, other than to say it's in the positive range now, which is a first for the day. So I've made quite a bit of progress. I know earlier in the day, probably this morning, late morning, I was probably close to the bottom of the range. I was really feeling bad, and yet I've managed to crawl my way back. So proof positive, it actually does work. You really can do it. And then once you do that, of course, you're in a much better place to attract what you want in your life. Side note too, I mentioned something on Friday, I think it was, during the podcast with Linda. I think it was that one, or else the one in the morning with Tom and Alex. I don't remember which one, but I had alluded to the fact that I had a new project that I was working on, and I'll tell you quite honestly, that was one of the reasons I wasn't feeling it. I wasn't feeling great, but nevertheless, I stuck with my processes, and now I'm feeling better about it, and that's important because a new project is something where you really need to feel as good as you can in order to attract the right stuff. And I see that. We do have a question. Syra has asked a question. I hope I pronounced your name right. Syra? I'm not sure if I've got it right or not. Syra, she's asking, what's the difference between ego and your higher self? Any insight? The difference between ego and your higher self. Interesting question. There's going to be a lot of disagreement about that, a lot of different viewpoints and so forth. I think a lot of that you can kind of get past a lot of those differences just by answering one very basic question: what do you mean by ego? Because that word, and I've touched on this before, as have some of my co-hosts. That word's kind of a slippery word. It means different things to different people. So I'm just going to kind of take a stab in the dark and kind of estimate what I think you probably mean by it, because this is probably where most people have ego in mind when they think of the word ego. For most people, ego means that they, for whatever reason, in whatever way, they themselves are in the way of whatever it is they're trying to get to, whatever it is they're trying to attract in their life, some goal they have, or it can also be somebody in their life who they feel is behaving in an unkind manner toward themselves or toward others. So that's the ego getting in the way. Another way, since you're contrasting the difference between ego and higher self is a term that we use to describe the connection that we have inside of ourselves to the non-physical, to the world of source energy that we all come from, and the idea that many people have when they differentiate between ego and higher self is the idea that when you are in your ego, you are in effect blocking yourself from that higher self. So I think that's the way most people tend to use it. Myself, I tend to take a little bit of a different stance. I tend to take the stance that ego is a word that describes somebody who is behaving in a way that other people don't like. Usually, it's somebody who is expressing opinions about somebody else or about a situation that are expressed in a negative or a snarky way or something like that, or somebody who is not being kind towards somebody else or toward other people. If it's ego taken to egotism to that length, then it's somebody who is routinely insensitive to others. That's what people usually mean by ego. And if that's what you mean, I think what that really is kind of an extreme case, an extreme example of what it's like to be expressing yourself negatively. Because I think that's what people really mean. You're expressing yourself negatively. Whereas when you're connected to your higher self, the higher self or the inner self, what I like to call my inner world, is a positive connection. It's a feel-good connection. So I guess for me, Syra, the contrast between the two is that my higher self or my connection to my higher self or my inner wall, that's my good feeling connection. And ego, as I'm just defining the term, is where I'm not feeling good about myself or I'm not feeling good about somebody else because I feel like their ego's in the way. So that's my answer. But fortunately, you don't have to rely just on my opinion because it looks like Anne Marie has connected in. So, hello, Anne Marie. Let's see if we can get you to answer the question after we ask you, how are you? How's it going? And how was dinner?
Hi, Walt. Dinner was fantastic. They had unbeknownst to me prior to this night, they had a dinner special, 2 for $20. I was like, wow, that's great. So what happened was a friend of ours is playing jazz tonight, the Trevor Davis Jazz Affair. So I had planned to go to this at 6 o'clock, and I figured I'd be done by 8 o'clock, but we wound up visiting a friend and then going to my parents' house this afternoon, and so things just got way late, and we didn't get to the restaurant until almost 7. So
wow.
I apologize for being late, but I'm doing great. We had a great dinner, and it was great music, and so here I am.
Hooray.
So
well, you were actually here without realizing it because during the gap between when we started and when you connected in, I grabbed our book and I read Mike's story about how he met you and how you guys got your house together. So you were here anyway, even though you didn't know it.
Cool. That's great. Well, thanks. That's terrific.
And
so what's your question?
Well, Saira has asked a question that I started to answer, and she also has a follow-up. The question she asked is, what's the difference between ego and your higher self? And then the follow-up is, after I did my discussion, she typed in, so ego is fear-based, whereas higher self is from a place of love. Would that be right? And I would say, yeah. I'd say that's basically it. Whenever we're in an ego space, we're in an afraid space for one way, one reason or another. We are in a place of negative feeling. And anything that's negative is certainly going to be fear associated. So yeah, I'd say that's my answer to that. But what do you think, Amory? What's the difference between ego and your higher self?
Oh, I think very similarly to that, but it's a little bit different. I think that your higher self is more of a spiritual base. That's from your higher self, your pure spiritual, all-knowing, all-loving, just pure love self. And ego, to me, I feel, is your human self. The self of you that comes from your earthly humanity. So it's more susceptible to greed and to fear and to all of those negative traits that we are exposed to here on planet Earth.
So what is
So
it? What is it that what if we're here in our physical bodies, so to speak, and we're living that existence, but we're not experiencing fear and the negative emotions. We're living in a positive space. Is that ego still?
well, it can be because I think that there is such a thing as a healthy sense of ego,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's very connected to your level of self confidence.
Mm-hmm.
I
Okay.
think you need some level of ego in order to be like not depressed, for example. So I think ego is that part of you that is connected to your humanity, but it 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 can get out of hand. It can be too much. I think you have to find a very delicate balance of having too much ego or coming from your ego self too much versus versus not enough. But I
Mm-hmm.
think that your ego is I think anyway, and I'm not well studied on this, so this is my opinion. Um, it's I wonder what what's his name would say. Who's the guy? The Power of Now.
Eckhart Tolle.
Eckhart Tolle. No, Eckhart Tolle. I'm curious what Eckhart Tolle talks about ego, and because there's a lot written about ego, but for me, I think that it's that part of us that's more human based, and yes, I would say it often comes from a place of fear, or it tends to, because we're human, we're exposed to fear. We're
Yeah.
in a spiritual realm, and in the non-physical, there is no fear. It's all love based.
That's a
So
good point.
I think it connects us to that part of humanity that allows us to feel all those different emotions.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's balanced, it's okay. I think a healthy sense, there is such a thing as a healthy ego, but a lot of times it gets out of hand, and then people's ego grows too much, or it takes over, and then it's not good.
And that ties into what I was talking about before you came on, that it depends on how you define ego, and everybody has a different definition. So that's the slippery part. You have to know what it is you're talking about first before you can figure out what it is that it relates to, say, a higher self.
Yeah.
And I guess I really liked the explanations we gave, so we hit the mark as usual. Congratulations.
All right.
So you guys were listening to some jazz music during your dinner. That must have been really nice.
Very nice. I love listening to live music now. I'm kind of spoiled in that regard. Working at the Butler Tree every weekend, getting to listen to it. It's like, I love listening to live music. It's
Right.
just it's to be like enveloped in the sound and witness the musicians actually, moving their fingers to create the music.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's such a great thing to watch and experience.
Well, it's another way of getting into that happy place too. Something I was talking about earlier in the show. I was explaining to the audience that this weekend was kind of a tough weekend for me. No matter what I do with my processes, my activities that I do to help get into a better feeling place, there were times where, throughout the weekend, where I just was not feeling it. I wasn't getting there. And as a result, I mean, the weekend was a bit of a struggle for me. But I talked about how I just stuck with my processes. I stuck with my feel goods, and just, even though they weren't getting there, even though I wasn't getting the big bang that I usually get out of them, I just kept sticking with doing them. And eventually, by the time the time rolled around for us to do the podcast, I can't say I was feeling great, but I was feeling a lot better. So it's all about just sticking with it throughout the day, because if you don't, you can get into that negative vortex really, really fast, especially when you're starting the day feeling not good at all.
Oh, that's so true. I have a question for you, Walt. Did you call your Pivot Pal?
I did not call it Pivot Pal, no. Well, in a sense, I did actually, because I went to Louise and asked her, well, I didn't really ask her, I just told her what was going on. And her reaction is, I don't know what to do to help you. So,
Oh, Walt, I think you need another Pivot Pal. You might have to have her in the podcast able to help them. And I'm thinking to myself, you got to have a couple people that you can talk to in those times when you're feeling really blue to help you get out of it sometimes. And sometimes you're by yourself, but, like the whole purpose of the Pivot Pal, sometimes it's nice to have somebody you can call or text or message or something to help you get out of your funk,
Well, I'll remember that next time. I'll definitely call you so that I can get that help.
That's fine. Well, you can always call me or text me. That's fine. I'll be happy to get out of it.
I think I heard Mike in the background there. Are you there, Mike? Are you listening in?
I'm driving the car. We're
car.
podcasting from the car, yes.
Okay.
How you doing?
I'm doing better than I was. That's how I'm doing. That was the whole point of the first half of the show today, is talking about what you do when you're not feeling it, when you're not feeling good.
Yeah, take a nap.
I did that.
I can relate to
You can relate to it?
Yeah.
Well,
it's been, yeah.
Well, actually, you relate to it in a way that you didn't know, Mike, because I actually read your story during the period while I was waiting for Anne Marie to connect in. So, yeah, you related to it, even though you didn't realize you were relating to it.
No, but it was a tough weekend for myself, energy-wise. There's been a really crazy energy about that. A few people that I've had conversations with that were saying, I don't know what's going on, but I just feel...
Really?
I feel balanced, yeah. There's just some sort of negative vibe out there that people are just it's sucking them in for some reason. And I felt it. And I struggled a bit this weekend myself, and I had to rely on going back to some of the habits that I needed to switch. And actually that voice started coming back a little bit, and I had to get back in the mirror and say, hey, I still love you, man.
Well, it's interesting you should mention the mirror exercise, Mike, because I did my mirror exercise first thing this morning, knowing that I really needed it. And for the first time in weeks, at the end of it, I wasn't feeling a lot better. It really surprised me. And you kind of have to be ready for that when that happens, because it can happen. You can do a process and it just isn't really doing it the way you would hope it would do it. And that was what happened this morning.
Oh.
But it's interesting what you mentioned. I didn't realize that it never occurred to me that there could be some sort of energetic thing going on that's attracting or affecting a lot of people. But as I think about it, I mean, like I said, Louise didn't have anything for me either. And in fact, we had planned to go out and do some grocery shopping and a couple things today. And she just wanted to stay on the couch. She didn't want to go anywhere. So I think she was probably affected by whatever it was too. I don't know what's going on, but there's something. And that's when you have to. That's when you need your processes.
I think it has something to do with the moons and the planets, but I'll have to call my guru for that.
Yeah, there was a very peculiar looking moon the other night. And I felt a strange energy about that. Really bizarre.
Now,
I don't know how to describe it. It looked like an orange wedge, that was just sitting flat, and the whole top part of the moon was darkened. When we pulled up to our house, and we were like, "Wow, that's a crazy looking moon." And I felt a really bizarre energy about it. So I don't know.
Now, you're a Reiki master. Is there anything that you do as a Reiki master to help, deal with a situation like this?
The one thing that I do every single day is to breathe, is to expand my lungs as far as I'll, fill my lungs up and then raise my arms up over my head and then exhale down. Just a simple thing just to get myself back into my center. Whenever I go off, off center, that's the one thing I fall back on that you can just do. Anybody can do it. You don't have to have special training, and it just balances your energy out. Or I'll circle my palms. I do that a lot. And now at this stage of the game, I just say to myself, "Geez, Mike, this is ridiculous. You're a practitioner. You should be better at this sometimes."
Well, that's the way it felt to me this morning and this afternoon. I mean, I was struggling like crazy. I had my list, right, that Patty Framo suggested I create. It's got like 16 things on it that I do that make me feel better. And I was working through different items on the list, and I wasn't getting anywhere. I mean, even my best item, which is to take a walk while listening to positive music, that only gave me a small boost. I'm thinking, whoa, what kind of a day is this? All these positive things I'm doing, and they aren't doing a whole lot for me. But I also realized that even though that was the case, at least I wasn't going down the rabbit trail of the negative vortex, which I could very easily have been doing. I could feel that happening. So at least I was stopping for that from happening. I was kind of in a holding pattern, but it was a whole lot better than going negative, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, tie a knot and hang on. It'll get better.
Tie a knot.
Hang on. You don't want to slip off that rope. I remember being in a class with Anita Gandhi at the Buttonwood Tree, and he was talking about energy and how it shifts and what we need to do. And I remember this, and I practiced it right away, and it worked. We need to embrace whatever it is that we're feeling. And I'll often, this sounds a little crazy, but I'll often talk to it and say, I know who you are. I recognize you're an old habit, but you're no longer needed here. I've replaced you with a new habit, so you can go help somebody else now. And it just kind of helps a little bit, to like, I don't know if I finally, I'm losing it completely and I'm talking to these old habits. It seems to work.
Well, hey, if it works, that's great. I mean, I can't honestly say that I had the presence of mind to make that connection and say, oh, this is something I should be communicating with. Like I was talking about to the audience earlier in the podcast, I couldn't even identify what the mood was. I mean, you look at like the Abraham Hicks 22-point scale, and I asked myself literally, what am I feeling? Where am I on that scale? And I couldn't answer it. The only thing I could say is, I don't feel good. I don't feel good. That's all I could tell you. And then when I would try one of the processes, maybe I'd get like a little bit better. I couldn't tell you what new step I was on. It was just, I feel better. Sometimes you have to just kind of go with that. You can't identify anymore. So you go with what you can identify. I don't feel good. I feel better. And just aim for feeling better.
I've wondered often, is this something that we could be carrying over from a previous lifetime, that like it's stuck in our cellular memory and it's just some other event or something or emotion happens and it triggers it and it just pops up? I don't know, because I get lost with it sometimes myself when this funk energy just comes in like a bad storm and it just hit. I often wonder if that's a possibility.
Well, Linda Armstrong, who does the Friday afternoon podcast with me, would say, yes, that is a possibility. And in fact, when she does her work with her clients to help clear them of bad energy and so forth, I don't remember the exact phrase that she uses, but she talks about how she is clearing stuff both from our current past in this lifetime and from other lifetimes and from any other life situation where we brought this in previously because it helped us, but now it no longer serves us. So, because it doesn't serve us anymore, we release it to source energy again. So she would agree with you. Yes, that can definitely be it. Although I have to say, if that's the case in this particular case, what's going on today, then we all have this past lifetime thing that decided to manifest on the same day, which would be pretty remarkable. Not impossible, just remarkable.
Do you think it's possible that maybe certain times in your life that you somebody had negative thoughts about you, that could come up as an energy and change your day too?
Well, sure. I mean, that's always possible. Interesting thing, there was a conversation that went on offline behind the scenes that I don't want to go into the details about because it was privileged information. But a theme that popped up during that conversation was the theme of what one person involved in that conversation called vampire energy or stealing somebody else's energy. And that's kind of related to what you're talking about, the idea of stealing someone else's energy. It occurred to me that that's a fairly common concept, but it also occurs to me what Abraham says. Because Abraham tells us we're always, under all circumstances, in control and responsible for our own energy, for our own feeling, and we can choose whatever feeling we want to change to just by changing our thought process. And because of that thought, it occurs to me that anytime we talk about somebody else stealing our energy, what we're really saying is we're allowing ourselves to give up our energy because someone else is demanding it, which is a different way of looking at the same thing. We're giving it up voluntarily. We will talk about it as if they stole it from us, but really we're the one who's giving it up.
Right. It's almost like you're yielding it. Yeah,
Yes.
I think you're right there.
Exactly. So any time that we feel like someone's stealing our energy, it's really an opportunity to recognize I am allowing them to take my energy. First of all, why did I make that decision? And second of all, I can change that decision just by changing my thought process. What am I going to change my thought process to?
Right. Right. And I think that speaks to a higher concept that we do not, I think as humanity, as individual humans on this earth, we do not recognize our own power. And that's something that I'm really passionate about, helping people learn that they have power to change their circumstances. They have the power within them to create as they want to create. I mean, that's what we're all learning about right now. But it's just such an important thing that, like you just pointed out, we have the power to let people steal our energy or abuse us or not.
Mm-hmm. Exactly it. And we get to decide. That's the best part.
Right.
We're not dependent upon, do we need to have somebody to clear our energy? No, it's nice to have. Certainly hiring somebody who's good at doing that, like Linda is, for instance, she's very good at that, is a wonderful thing to have. But we can still do it ourselves. We all have that same power. Linda would be the first one to tell us that. That power is ours at all times. It's just a question of, are we willing and even able to get ourselves to change our thought process? Like when we're in the middle of something like I was in today, and Mike, apparently you were in too, it can seem impossible to change the thought process. I mean, there were a couple of moments during the day where I didn't feel like I could even tell you what I would have to change it to. It was outside of my reach. It was that kind of thing where all I could feel was just that negative vortex stuff. Fortunately, I've dealt with this stuff often enough now and consciously enough now that I recognized that pattern of saying, it's outside of my reach. And that little voice finally kicked in and said, no, it's not. It's in your reach.
That's the good voice.
That's the good voice. Yeah, the good angel. That's the left shoulder, right?
That's the left shoulder.
So even though I couldn't find it right away, at least I had a little voice reminding me, you can do this. You actually can get there. It's just a question of you being willing to do it. And at that point, that's where I want to knock the little voice off my shoulder because I'm so pissed. 'Cause I can't feel it yet.
I thought of another little technique that I implemented in my arsenal lately. Is on the steering wheel of my truck, there's a 3x5 index card, and it reads as such. As I think, I feel. As I feel, I radiate. As I radiate, I create.
Wow.
And that puts me right back into perspective of, hey, wait a minute, you need to change what you're thinking here, Mike. And that was the pivot point for me today when I got into my pickup truck mid-morning, and I read that, and I'm like, okay, if I want the rest of this day to go well, I need to just alter my thoughts and just start feeling good that, hey, yeah, my truck is old, but it still starts and runs and everything is good. I have my health. I still have all my hair at my age and things are good.
Yeah. Well, that's what I like to do when I get into a funk. I try to think about the good things that I have going on, things that I'm grateful for. That always seems to help me get out of a funk. What am I grateful for? Unless I'm super depressed about something that is just really upsetting me. But generally speaking, if I start thinking about things I'm grateful for, then I can get out of it.
Mm-hmm. What's your reminder? What do you do in order to get yourself to shift when you're in that place, like you said, that you don't feel like you can climb out? You feel like you're overwhelmed by it. What do you do? How do you handle that in your life?
You mean when I'm really bad?
Yeah.
Or when I'm really depressed?
Right.
I generally do a variety of things. I just kind of go through my things of what works, and I usually start with trying to feel grateful. And if gratitude doesn't work, I will try to. Honestly, I confess, I will try chocolate.
Okay. Well, that's all right.
It doesn't usually work all the way, but it does make me happy for a moment. Um, so I will listen to music. I will start writing things down on a pad that I'm grateful for. And I just try to get out of my head whatever I was thinking about. I try to think to myself, well, that's not true, because usually if I'm in a really bad funk, I'm down on myself. I'm, something happened where I'm mad at myself or I'm upset with myself. And so
Right.
I try to just talk myself out of it and say, well, it could have been worse and you were trying to help or, whatever the situation is, and just try to talk myself out of it. And generally after a little while, I'll feel better.
Mm-hmm. Does that happen often enough, or is that a fairly rare occurrence these days?
No, it's fairly rare. I'd say,
Yeah, that's good.
like maybe once every 6 months or something.
Ah, yeah. And that's because of how much work you do, right? I mean, because you don't just get to that place by accident where you're rarely having a bad funk day. You get there by working on yourself, by working and focusing on your positives and having your daily processes and your habits and routines that get you into a better feeling place. Because otherwise, you probably have it happen more often, wouldn't you?
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. In fact, I'm going to be starting a new practice. One of the things that I get down on myself for in the past, anyway, has been that I'm not journaling enough. I'm not writing enough. And today I read something that was talking about the importance of writing things down. And I said, that's it, Anne-Marie. Every morning when you get up, I'm going to start journaling. And so I'm going to develop a new morning routine. And it talks about how in the morning you are more apt to stick to new habits because you have more willpower in the morning. And it talks about before you go to sleep, making intentions for giving your subconscious something to work on. Mm-hmm. And I think, who was it? Thomas Edison says something like, you should always give your subconscious, or make a request to your subconscious before you go to sleep. So it has something to do while you're sleeping. And then you wake up in the morning and you journal and you write about it, and you have sometimes insights come to you. And so I'm going to start doing that, Walt. I mean, Mike's doing mirror work. I'm going to do writing work. And I think that when you do a habit over and over that's healthy for you, and when you stick to it, I think that's a real big confidence booster. And I think that's a really good way to keep yourself motivated to being positive and reaffirming yourself that you're doing something good.
That's a great point. I love the way that you're tying an evening process to a morning process. I mean, you mentioned Edison. Neville Goddard talked about when you're trying to manifest something, you do your best manifesting as you're getting ready to fall asleep. He was very much of an advocate of that. But I like the fact that you not only use the evening process, but then you decide to write about it in the morning, the journaling, which
right.
I don't think I've ever heard anybody talk about doing that. Journaling what you were trying to manifest or attract or think about in the evening and overnight. That's a good practice. It's good. I mean, you've done that one before. I take it you have a past history doing that.
Well, I have a past history of writing, but I would tend to write at night what happened during the day. And this is kind of the opposite, where you're writing down in the morning, maybe insights that came to you through the night, but also your plan for the day and your plan for your goals. And if you have big goals, you write them down and you keep repeating them over and over again. And, it just sort of clarifies to the universe what it is you want. And the more you focus on it, of course, as we all know, and the more you write it down, the higher the likelihood is that it will happen.
Right. Yep. That's true. So this this is a new experiment then. This is a new practice that you're trying out. Cool. So I mean, have you started, or is tomorrow morning the first day, or where are you on this?
Yeah, this morning was my first day. I got out a new notebook and I started it today. I said, this is the start of a brand new day. And I'm going to go to bed early tonight. I'm going to start getting up earlier in the morning, at least some of the days. I work late at night, so I can't get up early every morning. But at least 2 or 3 mornings out of the week, I want to get up earlier and spend more time just focusing on me and grounding myself before I start the day, so that I'm better positioned to handle the whole day as it approaches. I don't want to just sort of live by default and react as things happen to me. I want to be more a planner of my day and as Abraham says, pre-pave it.
Right.
So, you're anticipating how your day is going to go, and you're better equipped for it. And, I think that's an important thing that a lot of us don't do. And I think it's an important thing. We got to pre-pave our days, anticipate how we want them to go.
I've never been much of a journaler. I've tried it a few times and never really did much for me. I know though that there are a lot of people who get a lot of out of journaling. They swear by it. Mike or Tom Wells is big on journaling. He does huge amounts of journaling. He actually goes through times where he does kind of like what you do on New Year's Eve. He'll burn a whole bunch of journals just to kind of release them to the world because he has like stacks and stacks of them. So he's a big time journaler. But I'm curious to know what your take is on what the value is. Where do you get the big value out of journaling? What does it really do for you?
Well, that's a good question, Walt. Let me get back to you in a couple of weeks because my journaling in my past has been more of a kind of like keeping a diary of just a recording of what's happening. And so I want to change it a little bit because I want to talk more about, planning and goals and that kind of thing. And also, and one of the things that is probably going to be consistent with what I did in the past and also going forward is when you write down how you feel about something, it enables you to move past it. It's kind of like, I think you were talking to somebody, you were talking to Joel this morning. Well, I was listening to one of your podcasts with Joel this morning. Not that you talked to Joel this morning.
Well, then for you, I was talking to him this morning.
Well, it might have been the one. I don't know. Anyway, the point was you talked about validating your emotions. And a lot of times we want to talk to somebody and say, yeah, that really stunk. I really got hurt badly. Look at how badly this hurt. And you want some validation from somebody. And I don't like doing that. I don't like complaining to other people or saying, look at how bad this is or anything like that. So I can write about it and I can explain how I felt and I can explain all my thoughts with that scenario and I can put it all down on paper and that releases it for me. That feels like to me like I'm talking to, the angels or somebody and they know how I feel and there it is.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a release.
And it works then because obviously you don't do a process repeatedly unless you find that it's effective. You've done that repeatedly. So you found it to be effective on one level anyway.
Yes, you're right. Yep.
That's cool. Cool. You found a good process.
I think it's good.
That's actually, I think, probably the most important thing is Patty Framo was the one who told me, create your list and post it on the wall someplace so that when you do have a bad day, you can go to your list and you can just, the list is all the things that you've learned are effective in helping you to feel better. So you can go to your list and not have to try to remember what's on the list or what's optional, what's a possibility for you to go to, and just pick one and do it, which is what I did today. That is what my point is. There's a great advantage in taking the time to make that list. There's a great advantage to knowing what your go-to processes are. Or if you, like me, are somebody who has trouble remembering what your go-to processes are when you're having a tough day, to actually have it written down and posted someplace that you can just go to, someplace that's really visible. You can hardly miss it because it's in a space you're always in every single day. And have that list there so that even though you can't think of anything, you can look at the list and say, oh, yeah, well, I know that worked in the past. I'll try that one. And then you try it. And then even if that one doesn't work, you go to another item on the list. You got to have that list. Otherwise, boy, you're going to fall into that vortex really fast, that negative vortex.
Yeah, I agree.
I have a suggestion for you, Walt.
What's that?
You could write it on your mirror.
So I'll give you another thing, Walt. Sometimes when I just want to, and I do this a lot of times in the morning too, is I'll just go through the comics, the funny pages, to get a laugh, because laughing is really good for you. As you know, I'm a big proponent of laughter, and sometimes I'd read them. Sometimes I can get a good chuckle, and if I can get a little chuckle, I'll just kind of push it further to laugh out loud. And if we have time, I'll tell you a quick joke this morning I saw in the paper. So this couple sitting on the couch, right? The man and the wife are sitting on the couch, and the man says, yeah, we should go out for dinner tonight. Yeah, look at this restaurant. It's got 4 stars on Yelp. Oh, this Asian restaurant over at the other town. Maybe we go there. Or hey, look at this one. This one's got 4 stars, and it's pretty close by. Oh, hey, look at this one. This one's right on our street. Hey, this one says it's 0 miles away. How could that be? Oh, but it's only got 1 star on Yelp. And the wife turns the other way and goes, "Hey kids, I told you to take that down." and they go, "Well, we told you to stop making that beetloaf."
Oh dear. Oh no. That's funny though. That's good. It's a little scary though, the idea that you could end up being on Yelp for what you make at home. I mean, Yelp is supposed to be about when you go out to eat. It's not supposed to be what you're eating at home. But oh well. We've got just a couple minutes left. I just noticed the clock, so I got to get the messages in. Make sure that you're a subscriber to the podcast, and if you're not, become a subscriber. Really simply, just go to the homepage, loatoday.net. You'll find the icons there for your device. Click that, and just follow the steps, and you'll be able to get all the
Recording
episodes.
Recording is on. This meeting is being broadcast on Facebook Live.
I'm not sure what's going on there.
We lost you. I don't know what happened there.
I don't know. Everything kind of went away and came back and started going bonkers. I don't know what's going on there. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what happened either. But I got to do a shout out to my friend Lai. She's lying in the hospital. Sorry, Lai. Had to do that pun there. But my friend is lying in a recovery room. She had some surgery on her foot, and I just want to shout out because I know she's listening and say hello. And
aha, yeah, get that laughter going to heal. Absolutely.
Anyway, I hope she feels better soon.
I hope so too. That's another thing too. It's important to remember that when somebody else is suffering, we can help them get better. That's what you were trying to do just then. You were trying to help your friend get better just by focusing on her in a very positive and happy way. And that's not our normal thing to think about when we're thinking about somebody who's sick or dealing with a medical issue, but that's where we got to go to. I did that regularly with Louise over the last few months with the stuff she was going through. And I can tell you, it does work. It does make a difference. We had it with Dee Dee, one of our regular listeners. She was in the hospital. And we all did this thing on the show with Cindy one day. And she was actually facing imminent surgery. That was like two to 3 weeks ago, something like that. And sure enough, she avoided the surgery and is out of the hospital and actually joined us on a podcast last week. So it absolutely does work. But you have to get yourself into that good feeling place if you're going to help them. That's really the point I'm trying to make. You got to feel good in order to give them the assistance that they need. You can't do it from the point of, oh, I feel so sorry for them. Oh, I feel bad that they're sick. Oh, I feel bad that they just had the surgery. Doesn't work. Doesn't work. That's what we believe it works, but it doesn't. It's actually counterproductive. So you did the right thing. Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, that's a hard one when somebody is feeling really bad. How to help them, feel better, especially when it's something really, something bad happened. You want to sort of empathize and show your support for them.
Right.
And that's one of the hard things for me to do in a very effective way from an Abraham perspective.
Yep. Well, we managed to stay in a relatively positive space throughout the entire show. That is a victory as far as I'm concerned for today, considering how difficult today was for me. And from what Mike's saying, I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of it going around today. So I have to give us kudos, even though we even had a point where we electronically lost the show there for a second. But we stayed in the positive zone and it all worked out. So I wanted to go ahead, Mike.
thanks for reading my story on the podcast and
you're welcome.
allowing me to jump in tonight. I always enjoy interacting with you, Walt, and being a part of this LOA family because it's important to support each other. So thanks a lot, Walt.
I appreciate it. Well, thank you very much. And we want to thank our listeners as well, both on the live stream and on the recorded podcast, because without you, we wouldn't have a podcast. And with that thought in mind, we'll see you next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.